Again, this is Matt Sparks for our monthly training session here online. I'm going to be talking today about some various topics of Civil 3D and AutoCAD, some AutoCAD, some Civil 3D. And the reason why is we're starting to run out of topics as far as the Civil 3D only goes. So I'm kind of doing a catch-all here at the end. We might have a session or two left, so what I'm going to ask you guys to do is maybe take a couple of notes about things that you guys might want to see or might want to know more about, and submit that to your guys' supervisors. That way that they can get the list to me, and that way I can kind of tailor another session like this for topics that you guys want to talk about. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today, I guess I could put this over on the screen for just a second. Some of the stuff I was going to mention here, we're going to talk about annotative objects to begin with, and why they might be different than Civil 3D text, and also we're going to talk about the note style for generic text in Civil 3D and why that might be useful. We're going to kind of revisit some of the hatch entities. There's a lot of little features that a lot of people don't know about, so I usually like to talk about hatches a little bit. Data linking through Excel, how to actually link an Excel file to AutoCAD. Some people know how to do that, some people don't. And depending on time, we do have CMI tools and maybe even some dynamic blocks. I'm pretty much sure we're not going to be able to get to that one. But I want to mention CMI tools. This is CAD Masters Incorporated, what CMI stands for. We have our own tools that we write. And since BKF does buy the software from us, you do get the software for free. It's an add-on to Civil 3D and AutoCAD. And just to point out to you, there is a CMI tools tab here. If you do not have this install, don't hesitate to contact me, and I can get the install to you so you can actually add it to your list. And I do believe you guys are using 2012, so it would be a different version. We're showing 2013 here today, but it's very similar to what it does for 12 as well. So shoot me an email. You guys know how to get in contact with me, and I will get you that install if you do not have it. There's just some nice utilities here that kind of fill in some gaps, and I'll show you some of the stuff that might be useful to you. But just to start out, I'm going to talk about annotative objects, meaning there's many different types. There's text, multi-leaders, hatches can be annotative, blocks can be annotative, and including hatch patterns can be annotative. What annotative means is that the object can actually scale itself depending on the viewport's scale. So instead of having to have, like, the biggest topic I see is dimension styles. A lot of companies have standard dimension styles, and they have dimension styles for each scale that they need. What the annotative object does for you is you can have one style now and not have to worry so much about maintaining so many different styles. But the annotative side is a little bit different on how it works between AutoCAD and Civil 3D. In Civil 3D, the text is automatically annotative. And I guess I should have opened another drawing that had some Civil 3D text in it. What I mean by annotative is the size of this text and the labels depends on this guy right here, which is the annotative style, or annotative scale, I should say. So you'll see they'll automatically update based on whatever style you have set to in scale. Okay. In Civil 3D, this is automatic. You have no option. It's going to do this, whether you like it or not. Okay. In AutoCAD, you have a different scenario. You have some options as far as being annotative or not. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about why the annotative scale can be useful and why sometimes it can be kind of confusing, so it's nice to be able to get this little, hopefully, brush up for you guys. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to put some basic text in here, but based on the style of the text. So text style versus, multi-leader style versus dimension style, they all have this annotative option. So what I'm going to do is create a new style. I'm just going to call it anno for annotative. And as far as the text style goes, I'm going to just check the box here for annotative. The only thing that this does differently than just regular text, you see here it says height, but if I go to annotative, it says paper text height. So the difference here is you set the height you want to be on paper and let the annotative scale determine how big the actual text is on paper. Okay. So for now, I'm just going to put it at 0.1. Many companies are different, maybe 0.125 size on paper. So 0.1 inches on paper is what we're going to set that to. We are also going to talk a little bit in a minute about this match text orientation, the layout, and what that does. So for now, just setting a text style that is annotative. Okay. So if you use an annotative style, if you're just doing regular AutoCAD text, remember this is not Civil 3D text, just AutoCAD text, like maybe for details, or there's always some text that you need to put in there. This kind of text is determined based on the annotative scale. So before you do the text, you just got to make sure what scale you want to use. And for now, I'm just going to set to 40. I'm not too worried about it. And I'm going to go ahead and place some text in here. Okay. Notice here when I did the text, I guess I should have put that up here, it automatically knew what size the text is supposed to be. It's annotative, height's 4 because it does the 1 to 40 is a scale, so it multiplies that by 40 to get 40 times 0.1 to get the 4. So again, you don't have to worry about the size here. It automatically knows the size based on whatever scale you're doing. Now that's all fine and dandy. There is some caveats to that. Well, what if you start the drawing and you think it's going to be 40 scale, but then it turns out to be 50 scale or 100 scale or what have you? What the annotative text can also do for you is make sure that you can see that same piece of text in multiple viewports at the correct size. What I mean by that is if you have a viewport that's 1 to 40 inch, it'll show at 0.1. But if you have another viewport at 1 to 100, you also want it to show at 0.1 inches, and it will do that. But it has to be annotative in that regard. Now again, Civil 3D will do that automatically, but AutoCAD does not. You have to do a couple of settings here. So, confusing part here. This whole section right down here where we have the annotative scales, and there's these two buttons next to it. One is to annotation visibility, and one is automatically add scales. Okay, I'm going to turn this automatically add scales, and I'm also going to turn this off. So these are both off. What the confusing part is, if you ever receive a drawing that has all these annotative scales in it, sometimes these might be turned off, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose because it's difficult to see what's happening. If those are both off, and I'm not at 40 scale, I set it to like 1 to 20. Notice that it disappears. Okay. The reason why it disappears is because this button is off. It says only show annotative objects for the current scale. Now I'm at 1 to 20. When I did that piece of text, I said it was 1 to 40. Okay. So the reason why it does that, I'm going to turn this back on. When it's on, it shows all text whatever size it is. But notice it's not the same size. I mean, it's the same size as before. With 20 scale, it should have been, half the size. Okay. Here's the deal with the AutoCAD side of annotative. Move that away a little bit. So you'll see here the text here is annotative. Yes, the annotative scale is 40. If I click on this, you'll see that there's little 3 dots. This is in properties. So the way that AutoCAD works is in order to see it in multiple scales, you have to assign that scale to the object. So if you want to see this in 20 scale, 40 scale, and 100 scale, you would have to add those scales. Okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and do this manually. I'm going to add 20 scale, and I'm also going to add 100 scale. So these 3 are part of this object. Okay? So I'm going to hit OK. I don't know if you notice now that the text decreased in size. It's now at the 20 scale. Okay? So now if I go back to 40, you'll see it's the right size. If I go to 100, it's the correct size. Go back to 20, it's the correct size it's going to be on paper. So in order for the AutoCAD annotative to work, you have to assign multiple scales to the object if you want to show them in different scales. Okay. Same thing here. This is going to be turned off now, and if I go to 100, looks great. 40 looks great. Now all of a sudden, if I go to 30, 30 is not in the list, and that's why it's just not displayed because this has been turned off. If 30 is not in the list and this is turned on, it will show in the closest scale to it, but it's not going to be the correct one. Okay. So again, in properties, whatever annotative objects you have to assign different scales to that. Okay. So again, I have 20, 40, and 100. So what should happen, if I go to my layout here, it's just a paper space, ignore that there's a sheet there, I'm going to create some viewports. In this viewport, I'm going to make 1 to 100. Probably want to zoom into this guy here, 1 to 100. Okay. This one over here, I'm going to make it 1 to 40. Of course. So what you should notice, hopefully, is the word parking lot is the same size, even though these are different scale viewports. That's 100. That's 40. And of course, I'm going to make, what did I say, 20, I think. Get this in there. 1 to 20. Okay. So this gives you the opportunity in the same sheet or the same sheet, however you guys, or the same drawing, if you have multiple layout tabs or what have you, the same piece of text can be in multiple viewports at different scales. Okay? And so that way you don't have to duplicate the text. It used to be, before this existed, if you wanted to have the same piece of text in different scale viewports, you'd have to put them on different layers and then freeze and thaw in current viewport. Now at this point, all you have to do is make sure that the correct scales are assigned to the object. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go back to Model. Now, a couple of things here as well. So this button right here that I already showed you was Annotation Visibility. Will only display the text if one of the scales exists in that. That's what this button does. Okay? So if you receive a drawing and there's supposed to be text on there and you don't see it, you might want to try to check this one immediately to see if there's actually text in there that's just at the wrong scale. Now this button over here is automatically add scales when the annotative objects change. So if this is on and I change the scale, it automatically adds to it. For example, remember this only has 1 to 20, 1 to 40, 1 to 100. If I go through and actually change it, let's say 1 to 10 now, 1 to 10 didn't exist in there, but notice it added it. So with that checked, or with it on I should say, not checked, but with it on, if I look at my properties again, my annotative scale, it got added to the list. Okay? So of course I can manually delete it if I want to as well. Okay. So typically the way that I usually work with these is I do not have this checked because I don't want it to add scales every time I change. Okay? That's the AutoCAD side. Civil 3D doesn't do this extra thing because what's happening here, if I zoom in close enough, right now it's 20, 40, and 100, you'll notice that I have kind of a shadow here or an echo of these objects. This is actually one piece of text, but there's actually 3 parts to it, 3 pieces, one for each different scale. So if I have a drawing with nothing but text in it, hundreds of thousands of pieces of text, and they all have 8 scales assigned to each one, there's actually going to be, the drawing's going to be quite a bit bigger. So you kind of want to limit the amount of scales you have on each piece of text just for speed and for size of the drawing. Okay. But one thing that that AutoCAD text or AutoCAD annotative objects have differently to Civil 3D objects is there's actually this echo. And what I mean by that, let's say, for example, I'm going to go to the 100 scale one. So here's the text for the 100 scale. Usually in larger scales, the text is bigger, and sometimes they get overrun. But maybe in like the 10 scale, it doesn't. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So in this one, my current scale is 100. I can actually move this text independently of the other scales. If I use the move command, AutoCAD move, the whole thing moves. But if I use grips now, I'm only moving one of them. So if I say I want this one actually over here now, okay, notice the echoes are still over here. So if I go back to my 40 scale, it's over here. 20 scale over here, but 100 scale I moved with my grip over to here. The reason why that's useful is, again, larger text sometimes overrides something. You need to move just that one a little bit, but the other one you can't. I do wish that Civil 3D could do that, but it doesn't do that. It's all one object. So there's a little difference there between the annotative object and the Civil 3D label. Okay. So again, if I want them back, there's a couple other things I can do here. Let me go back to 40 scale. I'm going to click on this one, and I was showing you in here the properties where I can change the scales. There's some other things that I can do. If I click and then I right-click, there's some options in here for annotative object scale in the right-click menu, where I can add current scale, delete, any added. If I go to add or delete scales, it gets me to this box like I showed you before. So a lot of times I'll click and right-click to get to that same section. But this is the one I want to show you, the synchronize multiple scale positions. Since I've now moved this differently, so let's just do this here. On the 40 scale, I'll move this over here. So if I go to 20 scale, it's here. 40 scale there. And of course, 100 scale way on yonder. If I want to move them back together, synchronize their position is what the AutoCAD calls it. Whatever my current scale is where it's going to synchronize to. So let's say I'm going to go to my 40 scale, and I want them all to come back to here. I'm going to click on it, right-click, annotative scale or annotative object scale, and synchronize multiple scale positions. So you see all 3 of them are back to where my current scale was. So again, if I physically move it, see how they all moved? But then if I click and use the grip, only one of them moves. So you have some nice options there to deal with all these scales. So of course I'm moving this around, and in my layout tab hopefully all the text will be the correct size. Now one thing that I do notice as well is, let me go back into here. I'm going to delete my 100 scale object list. So now only 20 and 40 exists. So now you can kind of see what's happening here is I don't see it in that viewport because 100 scale doesn't exist. If I want to see it in Paperspace, you might notice here, if I go to my model, see these guys, these two checkboxes that I've already showed you, and layout, they're also here as well. So if I wanted to see it in my viewport, I have to turn this on. But notice it's the wrong size. It's not 100 scale because the 100 scale doesn't exist for that object. So as you can see, the theory here with AutoCAD annotative objects is you have to assign the scales to the object in order for it to scale correctly in the viewport. So again, but if I notice that, I can go and come into this thing, right-click, add current scale, and now I have it because it's in the 100 scale viewport. So there's a couple different things that I can do to get it to look correctly. Now again, I would say 90–95% of the time when you're plotting, you really only have one scale. But that other 10% gives you the option now to have the same piece of text in multiple scales showing correctly. Now also, text that is annotative does do the same thing through an X-reference. So if you X-reference some text and it has different scales assigned to it, it will also scale correctly as well. Okay. So with that theory, all the different annotative objects, being text, multi-leaders, dimension styles, hatches, and blocks, they can all be annotative. They all have the same kind of properties. Okay, for example, let me do dimensions really fast here. Looks like there's the style already that's annotative. Anytime you see that little, it's actually the cross section of a scale ruler. That's what that thing is. So anytime you see that thing, that means it's an annotative style. Right? Went back to my style here. The anno is annotative, but standard is not. See that? Okay. Now, what I'm also going to do here, I'm going to create a new style. I'm going to call it anno rotate. With anno rotate, the only difference I'm going to be here, everything's going to be the same, except I'm going to use this little match text orientation to layout. When that's checked, what that does is it automatically makes the text horizontal if you use a DView twist or a UCS when you rotate your viewport. So this one, not all the time you're going to want that to happen. So that's why I typically would have two styles, one that doesn't do that and then one that does. Okay. So in this case, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do another piece of text. I'm going to call it parking lot rotate. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the other one, is I'm going to go ahead and add those scales. So 40, 20, and 100. So I'm going to add those three again. And just to be ridiculous here, I'm going to rotate this one. Oops. 45 degrees. Oh. I just rotated it 45 degrees, but you notice I thought automatically rotating. I was going to rotate my viewport. I was doing that example into oblivion there. So you can see that it's actually rotated, but it's horizontal. Okay. Here, let me undo that. Okay. So I don't rotate it. But now I'm going to come to my layout tab, and I'm going to go ahead and rotate these guys. Okay. I'm going to use DView twist. Some people use UCS, but I'm just going to use DView. Okay. So the parking lot word was not rotated to the viewport, but this one is. You see here I've rotated just 45 degrees is what I've done. So you can have text that also rotates. Now keep in mind, Civil 3D does something similar to this. The difference here is you have to set up the style to do this. So we're going to show you that here in a minute. So again, with the text styles, you can have it rotate to that as well. So if I do another one over here, DView twist of 150 degrees. Okay. So you can see the same piece of text, but it's rotated correctly for each viewport. So again, that was the difference between the match layout and the not match layout. Because of course, sometimes you're going to want that to happen, and other times you might not. So annotative text styles have some pretty nice features as far as how the text reacts to each scale viewport. All right. So again, what I typically recommend is on the dimension styles that I only have 2 dimension styles, one for decimal and then one for architectural. And I don't have to have different dimension styles for each scale. So same kind of thing. I'm just going to do this briefly here. I'm going to go ahead and make a new one, call it decimal, and make it annotative. So now all the text in here, all the size in here is sized on paper. I'm not going to worry too much about that other than decimal, everything looks good. The only thing I'm going to do is make sure it's annotative. Of course, I don't want to go over every last setting in here. That's fine. So now, instead of having to know what scale you are, as far as what style you have, a lot of people have like decimal 10 or decimal 20 or decimal 100 for the different scales. Now you have one, and it's annotative. So whatever my current scale is, which happens to be 1 to 40, I will do a dimension. Okay, it's the right scale. If I go through and change it to 1 to 100, these changed. This one didn't because the scale is not added. But if I do another dimension, it's the right size. Go back to 40. Days don't change, and the reason for that is what I would have to do is grab both of these, add scale or delete scales, and make sure that 40 are both. Okay. Add 40. Add 100. I'm doing it at the same time because they're both checked. So now they should be good to go. So now if I go from 1 to 100, 1 to 40, they're automatically the correct size. So multi-liters, dimension styles, text, as well as blocks can be annotative, and hatch patterns can also be annotated. We'll show you a little bit about that when we get to the hatch themselves. Okay. So with that regard, as long as you're assigning the correct scales to these annotative objects, they're going to be the right size. Okay. And if you start the drawing at 40 scale and you're just doing 40 scale only, even though they're annotative, you don't need to add different scales. But later on, if it becomes, instead of 1 to 40, it needs to be 1 to 50, it's pretty easy to change every single one of those to the correct size just by adding the scale. Okay. So with annotative objects, you have the option of making sure you can have multiple scales of the same object, which you do not have that capability in regular AutoCAD text. So just that alone, I think, gives you the opportunity, even though you might not always use that, I still think annotative objects are the way to go. Okay. Now, to compare that with Civil 3D, we'll kind of show you that as well. So again, I'm going to go change the drawing. These are just Civil 3D labels, which is different than AutoCAD text. Okay. So the difference here is that I do not have to assign different scales. It doesn't even matter anymore for those guys. But here, how do I make this rotate correctly, and how do I make these things look correctly in viewports is kind of the question here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just make what's called a note label. Many people may know about this, but I'm going to, just in case. If I just want to do just simple text and not actually have it linked to an object, I can do that, and they're called notes. Okay, I'm going to add a note, and of course you can have different styles. I'm just going to use the one right out of the box. Okay, so I'm going to add a note style, and that happens to be the style of that object, and you can see it can be also almost like a multi-layer. And the way that it works is if you want a different piece of text in there, you have to edit the thing. So I got to click on it and edit the label text, call it whatever, add my parking lot to it. So now I have that. And where's my parking lot? There it is. Okay. Now, dealing with that style, depending on how I want it rotated or what have you, what I'm going to do in here, I'm in a different drawing, so I'm going to create 2 different viewports. You might notice that the text is humongous in here. That's because all Civil 3D objects will rotate or will make the right size correctly depending on where you are. All I'm doing is zooming in and regenning is all I'm doing, just to make sure I can see what the heck I'm doing. So I'm going to make this guy here 100 scale. Okay. Same thing in here. Sometimes it's hard to find the stuff when you got so much text in there. Oh, there it is. And I'll make this one 40 scale. So I just did a regen all so I could see that. So depending on what scale it is, right, here's the 40 scale, here's the 100 scale, text will be correct. Okay. Now if I want it rotated to that, so what I'm going to do the same thing here, I'm going to do a D-view twist of 49 degrees, whatever that is. Okay. So in this particular style, it does not rotate. So I need to show you, as far as the label styles go in Civil 3D, how you can actually have these rotate to horizontal in these viewports. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and click on the actual object, and I'm going to go up to Label Properties and Edit Label Style. There's a general note. I'm going to go and edit the thing. And this is going to be universal for all label styles. They all have this same property. We might have talked about this at the very beginning of the styles, but a little refresher course. So of course the general tab shows what text style, layer, etc. But you'll see this behavior and plan readability. The behavior is if I want it to rotate to a particular view, instead of setting it to object, I set it to view. Okay? If I set it to world coordinate system, it'll automatically always rotate to wherever X and Y are. But I'm going to go to view because I'm rotating the thing. So if I have it set to view, then it does rotate to the viewport. So I'll hit OK. And so now you can kind of see what's doing it over here. Okay. So with AutoCAD, in the style, it determines whether it's annotative and matches the text orientation to layout based on style. Same thing in Civil 3D, the actual label style determines that. And again, in the Edit Label Style, in the General tab, this behavior determines the view. Now, if this is anything other than view here, if it's object or world coordinate system, then the plan readability comes into play. I'm going to set it back to object. And you'll see here it says plan readability true, and the readability bias is 110 degrees. I'll explain that in just a second. So we're back to this thing here. So in the viewport, I'm going to do another D-view twist at 105 degrees. I'll show you what happens. So D-view, twist, 105. Okay. Notice at 105 degrees, you see how the parking lot is still rotated, and you still reads that way. So what this does is the 110 degrees is designed to do is the minute you get to 100 or the minute you get to 90 degrees, you don't want it to flip. It gives a little bias to it, maybe another 20 degrees, and then it would. So if I do another D-view twist at 115 degrees, I'm outside of that 110 threshold. See how the parking lot word rotated. Okay. So you have two options with Civil 3D that you do not have with AutoCAD. With Civil 3D, you can say I don't want it to be, I don't want it to rotate horizontal, but I do want it to make it read upright. And this is a good time to kind of talk about when you're doing contours and you have labels on the contours. I do a twist on my viewports quite a bit, and I want to make sure I can read the text on the contours, and so make sure it's read upright based on the view. And so Civil 3D will automatically do that for you. AutoCAD will not. It'll only make it horizontal or not horizontal. Okay? And that's why these things rotated as well. This text over here is doing the same thing. See, over here it's this way. Over here it's the other side. That's what that plan readability is. Just to reiterate one last time. In the General tab, the behavior and the plan readability determine how it looks inside of a viewport. If I go to View, it'll be horizontal. If I have it plan readability to true, then it will rotate based on wherever north is for that particular viewport. And so that's kind of the differences between the AutoCAD text versus the Civil 3D text, where you have these styles control those viewports a little bit differently. Okay. So again, if I'm just doing AutoCAD text, I need to be concerned with my annotative scales. That's just AutoCAD side. With Civil 3D, there is no such thing as that. It's just going to do it automatically. Cool. All right. And then so all those different objects, whether it be dimension styles, multi-leader styles, etc., I typically recommend that you use annotative so you have that capability. Makes it a little easier, at least in my opinion, having to deal with this versus having to have different styles for each scale. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and leave it open for questions for a minute. I don't see anybody type anything, so evidently people are understanding, so that's good. Again, I am monitoring those questions, so if you do have them, please let me know, and I will address them. All right. Okay. So we're going to move on to hatch entities. I mean, I'm sure everybody's done a hatch before, but we'll show you some different functionalities that might be useful to you. Okay. Get my little notes over here, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to make something, just a rectangle over here, and the reason for that is so I can have this being horizontal. So just give me a second here. Okay. So hatch patterns, of course, everybody knows that you can put it assigned to an object, or you can actually pick what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few examples, just to be brief about it. So I'm just going to type in H for hatch, and then of course the ribbon pops up for that, where I can pick different boundaries over on this side. There's my pattern. There's some other things that we're going to talk about as well. You'll see here there's associative and there's also annotative. So like I was saying before, you can make hatch patterns annotative. So if you have a hatch pattern of a concrete here, and that happens to be at different scales, the scale of the hatch pattern can actually react to what scale your viewport is. And that's what this is. Okay. I'm going to pick a brick pattern here and make it, I don't know, 100. So you'll notice here as I hover over here, it should make it so maybe 50. Okay. And I can do that either by pick points or I can select an object as well. So that's pretty self-explanatory, hopefully. Now the reason why I wanted to point this out is now that I have that hatch pattern, I can do a few more other things with it. Of course, I just click on it and I come back, and of course I can change what I want about that. Okay. But what I did want to show you, a lot of people might not have known, is if I'm doing a brick pattern, what if I want my brick to start at the bottom left-hand corner of that? And that's where this comes in, where you can do this set origin, where instead of having the origin be 0, 0, I can say I want it to be this corner. So you can see it kind of shifts and it calculates its hatch pattern based on that new origin. So if you're trying to do brick, obviously that's a good example. You know, you're doing concrete, it's probably not going to matter that much. But a lot of people didn't know that there's that set origin capability for that. Okay. Other things that you can do as well after the fact, if you want to create these guys in here as actual boundaries to that, you can add boundaries after the fact. Many people didn't know that. So if I click on that, you'll see that there is this boundaries where I can remove and recreate, or just recreate or select new boundaries, what have you. So if I hit select and I can grab these things as boundaries, now they're part of that. Okay. And of course, if I move this around, they should be linked now. So I can add stuff after the fact. And another thing that I do notice as well, okay, I'm just going to get rid of those for now. If I remove the boundary that was initially created, a lot of people think, well, now I can't really do anything with that. But I think this happened in 2012, the version that you guys are currently using, where if I click on that, you see I still have the boundary, and I can still move stuff around, and the hatch is still valid. I can still, do what I like to it. Okay? So that's kind of a nice little feature where I can come in and do that. Okay? So even though you might not have the boundary, it's still kind of what's called associative to itself, because there actually is a boundary there. All right. Same thing as well. What you can also do with these guys, I can also trim a hatch pattern. I don't know if you saw that. I was able to trim with that line. Now, since it's not associated anymore, that line doesn't actually do anything, but I can trim it as well. Can't extend it, but I can trim. So even if you don't have a boundary, you don't have to explode it and things like that to get to that. I can go back through that, make a rectangle, and I can trim a hatch pattern with just AutoCAD objects. Okay? So you're not limited to the fact that I see a lot of people come in here and drive me crazy, is explode the thing. And now it's just a bunch of lines. Don't have to anymore. Okay. Alrighty, and last but not least, I'm going to be brief here. This is another one I see a lot. So I have 3 circles, and I want to create a hatch pattern for all 3 of these. So I'm going to go to hatch. I'll use a different style this time. Instead of brick, I don't know, ANSI. You'll notice here that I can go one at a time, but a lot of times what you can do here is I can hit select, and I can pick all 3 of these all at once. Okay. But notice it's all one hatch pattern. Okay, sometimes that's not desirable, sometimes it is. So instead of having to be one hatch pattern, I want it to be 3 separate. I want it to get out and come in and come out of that command. So when I go to the hatch, there is an option in this thing down here where it says create separate hatches. Okay, create separate hatch. Now when I do my select, now they're separate. Okay. So that way you don't have to kind of go in and out or explode or do all that fun stuff that I see sometimes. And just to make sure, you know what, I don't know if this is the case for sure, but I'm going to go ahead and try it. I'm not going to create separate hatches. I'm going to see if you can change it to separate hatches after the fact. I don't know if you can. Yes, you can. Okay, I just want to make sure that was the case. So even if you don't have separate hatches, you can see that's a one object. Once you click on it, you can edit the style, etc. But you can create the separate hatches after the fact as well. Okay. All right. And last but not least on the hatch patterns is you can do a transparency. A lot of people might not have known that, but I'm going to show you that. I'm going to do a hatch pattern here and make it transparent so I can see behind it. This is a good one where you want to highlight an area of an aerial photograph. It always happens you try to do that, you can't see the photograph behind it. Well, now there's some other things you can do, like make it a sand pattern, make it really thin, or things like that, and deal with draw order. But now with the transparency, you do have that option. But there's some caveats that I want to show you. So I'm going to do a hatch, and this time I'm going to do a solid hatch. And you see there's this hatch transparency here. You can also do a transparency on a layer, an object itself, but I'm doing it on the hatch. I'm going to make it a 75%, and I'm going to pick it. Okay. So this object is supposed to be 75% transparent. And the reason why you're not seeing that is because it's not invoked in this drawing. So this little TPY down here, show and hide transparency, will only show you how it displays in the drawing. So now I click on that, and hopefully you can see behind that. Okay. All right. I have a couple questions. I'll get to those in just a second. I'll come back to that for you guys. Just 1 minute. Let me finish my thought here. On the hatch transparency, it will plot that way. That's the first question I always get, but I want to make sure that you guys understand when you go to the plot or how you plot, you must make sure that the plot transparency is turned on for it to plot that way. So it does not matter in the drawing whether this is on or off if you need to plot. This can be off like this and it can still plot correctly. This is just how it displays in the drawing. In order for it to plot, you have to have that checked. Okay? All right, so get back to the questions. First of all, generate a polyline from hatch without a boundary. There's a question for that. Yes, you can do that. Let me do another one over here. So solid, you can do the same thing, but question. Let me do a hatch. So again, the question is, can you generate a polyline from a hatch without a boundary? And yes, you can. Okay, so I have a hatch. Delete it. I don't have a boundary anymore. Okay. So in here, if I click on this guy, and there's some options in here. Thought it was right in here, and I missed it. Do I have to go the old way? I think I might have to go the old way. I've done it a bunch of times, but I forgot where it was. Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's recreate. Sorry. So if I click on this object and I need to do it, I just didn't see that. Recreates the boundary from the polyline region around it. So I can recreate that as a polyline or a region. I'll hit return for polyline. Associated with the new boundary, yes. So now I do have a polyline. And it actually is associated. So yeah, you can't get that back. So question 1, there you go. And the second one is, can you make the hatch default command select instead of pick? Good question. I do not know if you can or not. So go to the hatch, pick internal point, or select objects. So if I select objects, hit return, back into the hatch command. Unfortunately, whoever asked that question, it does not look like you can do that. And I can realize your question why you'd like that is because if you move your mouse around on things, it's the large drawing, it gets very slow. So it looks like that I see from what I see here, you cannot do that. So my recommendation would be when you go to the hatch command, don't move your mouse down until you come up here to hit select, I guess. But I don't know if that's the best solution, but that's what I got for you. Sorry. Okay. The other thing that I want to mention here is sometimes, depending on the PDF plotter, or if a lot of people like to plot to a PDF, I want to show this caveat with solid hatch patterns in PDF. So let me just do something really fast here. I'm going to plot this to a PDF to show you what can happen on a transparent object. So window, do that. I go to the preview. Okay. I didn't heed my own advice. I didn't hit the plot transparency. So it looks great on the preview. But let me show you what happens when you plot it to a PDF. Go to my desktop. Yeah. Oh, put it on my other side here. And this has been a known issue, and I'm not sure why it does this. I don't know if you can see the line work in there. It does this sometimes, but not other times. I've had better luck with certain drivers than other drivers, but I just want to mention, you see this little line, these little horizontal lines? That happens quite a bit on a solid hatch pattern that is transparent. Okay, so I just wanted to warn you, if you do a lot of PDF printing, the solid hatch does tend to do that. So I've had luck with Adobe, with the DWG to PDF that comes with a drawing. There's another one that's called Qt PDF, C-U-T-E PDF, that's a free driver. I've had luck with that one too, but sometimes it does all of those. I just wanted to warn you for the transparent of a solid hatch pattern. Okay. All right. So let me just close out of here. Save. Maybe I won't close because I got to come back to that. You might have a question. Close out of this one. All right, next topic. We got about 20 minutes left here, so I'll be quick with the data linking to Excel. So if I wanted to go ahead and link an Excel table to the drawing, there's a couple of different ways. And I'm going to do this in a new drawing just so it's blank, nothing in it. Okay. Let me get rid of the stinking grid. And I have a couple of these, like for example, I'll do that one. That's fine. I'll do the pipe schedule. So I have a table in here that I've done in Excel. Okay, very simple. If I want to bring in that to the drawing, there's a couple different ways. Okay. Maybe I'll do a little fancier one. Maybe we'll do this one instead. Even fancier. Okay. Where I can actually have this linked, so if I change the Excel file, it also updates my drawing. Okay. So we're going to bring this one in, so I'm going to show you how this is done. It used to be where you had to cut and paste, or copy and paste it to the drawing. It comes this big white blob. It's called an OLE object. Now this actually will come in as an AutoCAD entity. So I'm just typing in table, and I'm going to create a table. But here you'll see there's from a data link, where I can actually link it to an Excel table. Okay? So I'm going to go from a data link instead of start from an empty. And I'm going to hit this little button here to launch the data link manager, so I can link it to an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to call this one calcs. And it's going to ask me to browse to a file. Do I want the full path, the relative path, no path? I'm going to do full path because I'm in a drawing that's not named yet. So it's very similar to your X reference. And there's the XLS file that I have I'm going to bring in. And how you bring this in depends on these three checkboxes. If you want to bring in the entire sheet, if you want to link it to a named range, or a link to a specific range. A named range, you have to set that up in Excel. I don't believe I have, I guess I have a print area and that's it. I'm just going to go ahead and link it to the entire sheet. Okay. In addition to that, not just link it to that, I have some other options. I'm going to hit this little arrow here. I love how they like to hide different options from you. But in here, I can say I can actually allow writing to the source. What that means is I can change it in AutoCAD and have it update my Excel file. But you might not want to allow that. I typically like to go from Excel back to AutoCAD, but there might be another option for that. Other things is you want to convert the formats to text, or do you want to keep the data in formulas so you can actually see the formulas in AutoCAD? I don't know if it really matters. I'm going to go ahead and set it to keep the data formats, but solve the formulas. Actually, I'll keep the data formats and formulas. What that'll do is I'll see the formulas that were done. There'll be like a field, and then I can see that. Okay. And if I wanted to keep the data with Excel, if I have it set to this, I would change Excel, like if a different font or different justification, things like that, and then it would update my AutoCAD. So it depends on how you want to work. I typically like to have everything stored in my Excel file and have it update in AutoCAD. That way I change it in one spot. Okay. So now that I have the calcs, it's got a nice little link. I'll hit OK. Instead of from an empty table, it's going to grab it from calcs. I hit OK, and now, depending on whatever my style is, there is my table. So you can see the ones that are gray. The ones that are gray, it means that they're coming from a calc. The gray won't plot, but it's just kind of giving you an eye just to see what it is, right? So to give you an example here, I'm going to change a few things just to kind of show you what happens. So I'm going to go back and change this from Excel and show you how this updates. One thing that you can note here, you can see now you have this little link here, this data link, where I can right-click and go to my links and update all links if I need to update it, very similar to an Excel file. This did not exist until I had a link in the drawing. What also happens is now that this link is here, it does show up in your X-Reference dialog box. And I got to get to it. It's over here. 1 second. Oops. I have so many windows open here, it's hard for me to grab it. There it is. Okay. See, it actually shows you that you have an Excel link and where it's located, etc. So if you need to change where it is, you can do that very similar to what you would do in an X-Reference. But see, now I have the link. Once I change it in Excel, how do I update it? Okay. Let me go back to this guy here. And for my Q here, I'm going to change it to 2000, which you might notice all these things change, right? The pressure is PSI, I make it 80, so you can kind of see things are updating as I go. As I change this, if I go ahead and save this, I've opened it twice, have I not? Nice. I must have opened it twice. No, I don't restart my computer. So what should happen is if you're in it, it'll say if you want to update it. If this didn't happen, when you open the drawing the next time it updates, or I can right-click and update all data links. Okay. So you can see it goes back and now it changes. So you can see very quickly I can have this link to an Excel file, change my Excel, and have it update exactly how I want it. Now, depending on how you have the table style, if you want to show the lines, etc., the table style will actually control that. Just to show you really briefly, I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's using the standard style, and I can modify that style for, do I want to show these labels, or do I want to even show what text styles, etc. It's all controlled by that. If I don't want to show the borders, I don't have to. Okay, things like that. But you'll see here, the way that you know it's linked, if I click on this guy, you'll notice in here, if I just hover over something, see it's got a little lock on it, it even tells me that it's linked somewhere and where it's located. So if I wanted to update from AutoCAD to Excel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this guy, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to have to unlock it first. Where are we? There it is. I was blind there for a second. So locking, I'm going to go unlock the cell. Now I can go ahead and come into this and edit that. So if I want to move this to 2850, whatever it is, okay, I change in the drawing, but now I have to update my Excel file. So it's not automatic like it was going from Excel to AutoCAD. If I want to update my Excel file, I'm going to click on the table, right-click, and say Write Data Links to External Source. So you can see it's going through the little thing. Okay. I'm going to go and open the thing just to make sure that I'm not blowing smoke here. See, now it's 2850. Okay. So you can have a dual link between AutoCAD and Excel, but have it be AutoCAD entities so it plots correctly, and you can move it and deal with the styles a lot better than you could otherwise. Okay. So that's kind of a nice feature as well. Okay. So for the remaining, it looks like about 10 minutes here, I'm going to talk about CMI tools, some of those functions and why that might be useful in Civil 3D to help you out do certain things. So again, let me close this drawing, not save it. Not worried about this one either. Nope. Okay. You guys have probably seen this to death now, but I've created some extra entities in here to kind of show you around a little bit. So again, the CMI Tools tab, if you do not have this, it's just a simple install. Again, you can contact me and I will send you the link to download this, and you can install it because you guys do get it for free. There's no cost involved. You guys buy the software from us, which means you get this. So there's just some nice little utilities that will definitely help you do certain things. For example, you'll see that there are some DView twist capabilities here. And I forgot to put some text in here, so give me a second. And you can see I can't spell very well, but too bad. Okay. What I'm going to do is pretend that this is a viewport, and I want to show this road in the viewport. A lot of times you want to rotate that viewport, so you use DView twist. But what DView twist is, you have to know the angle, or you have to kind of approximate. So we have this little button here to set a DView twist by picking 2 points on the screen. So a couple things, what it's nice that it does, take a look at my crosshairs after I'm done. So I say from there to there, I want that to be that's my X coordinate, right? So it rotates it to that line that I just picked, and notice that my crosshairs are now set to that angle. So if I do ortho or text, I can do the ortho thing and have it be correct. Okay? So that's kind of a nice little feature. If I set it back to twist to 0, it goes back, so my crosshairs go back to 0. Now, if I'm just dealing with AutoCAD text and I'm not doing annotative and I want to rotate this text to that angle, again, it just has to be AutoCAD text. That's where this comes in, this twist annotation. So if I go to twist annotation, I want to individually rotate each one individually. So I'm going to hit return for that. And I'm going to grab all of those guys. And notice what happens to the angle of that text. I should have not picked everything, haven't I? Okay. So it rotates whatever my current DView twist is. So it's kind of a nice little feature for certain text. Now keep in mind, if you want it to rotate automatically, you can have annotative text, or you can have the Civil 3D text do that automatically. Okay. So a couple nice little cool ones. I like the DView twist one quite a bit. Okay. All right. Dealing with Civil 3D points, if you need to show those, what I'm going to do here is I need to show these points based on a station and offset of this alignment. Now you can do a point table in Civil 3D. So there is that capability, so I can add a point table. Kind of show you something really fast here. And I'm going to pick all points just to show you what it looks like. Okay. So that's a point table in Civil 3D. What ours does a little bit differently. It doesn't do it as smart as this one does. It doesn't use a style. It just uses text. Okay. But we have the capability of adding a few more things. So I wanted to at least show you that. So when we create a point table, we have the capability of using a station and offset of an alignment. So sometimes that's useful. And you can also export this to Excel. But I'll do a create and drawing. I'm going to go ahead and select my alignment as Main Street. That's what this one is. And I'll put it right here. So this one, again, this is just text and lines, but you now have a station and offset. If you want to do it the other way, where you said export to Excel, you can do the same thing as well. It'll open up Excel and put it into that. Sometimes that can be useful to you, little things like that. Okay. Kind of nice. Okay, briefly there. The export surface to an XYZ file. If you're trying to transfer this surface to a GIS program, a lot of times it might be some kind of ArcGIS or what have you. A lot of times they need those files. You can actually pick on this thing, and it'll actually export to an XYZ file, just XYZ coordinates of the surface, so you can define that pretty quickly if you wanted to do it that way. So by doing that, create an XYZ file, show what it looks like. Oh, of course it's on the other screen. XYZ. And then that way you can import that to a GIS program, or hand that off to someone else using MicroStation or what have you. Sometimes that's useful to do that. Okay. All right. So a couple of utilities. I got about 5 minutes here, so I'm going to briefly talk about some that I think are important. So the alignment utilities I think are good, and then style utilities can be very useful. So if I want to list the station offset elevation, I'm going to go ahead and by picking on the basically on the plan view. So I'm going to select the alignment as side street, which is this one, and I'm going to list the FG, which is the finished grade. And wherever I pick, you'll notice here it gives me the station offset and the elevation of the profile and the grade on the profile. So if I pick a point, say right there at station 237, it's giving me a grade of almost 3%, and that's because I'm in that realm of the 2.98. So again, you can do some listings without having to go both ways. So wherever I pick, it's doing me whatever the grade is and whatever the profile elevation is wherever I pick. Okay? In addition to that, if you're doing some of this stuff, you can do some labeling along these. For example, when subdivisions were around and subdivisions seem to be coming back, you have to label every single one of the lot lines based on like a top of curb elevation or a back of walk elevation. And so what we can do here is we can label it one at a time, and then based on a profile, if I happen to know what the grade is and then a distance in Y, or I know what the difference in Y is, or I can calc it this way. So let's say I happen to know that from the center line to the top of curb elevation, I know it's 0.25 higher, just making that up. And you can see what the actual label looks like. But by doing that, now I can label a point or a set of lines. If I just do one point, just show what it looks like. And I want to label this point right here to that. So it labels it that way. It does the calc for me. Keep in mind that it's just dumb old text and a leader. So it's not using the Civil 3D side at all. But if you're trying to do this, sometimes it could be useful to at least have something in there. And the lines one is kind of a nice one, just to show you that one. Label lines. I'm going to label all the lines to that at the same time. So it comes and labels each one. Okay. So there can be some use in that as well. But just to kind of show you a nice couple of features as well. So I got about a couple minutes here. There's some profile utilities where I can shift the profile. I can mark a point on a profile by just picking a point in a plan. A lot of these things are mostly self-explanatory. Okay. But these two here, I can create a profile from a 3D polyline and points. I can always go the other way in Civil 3D by creating from a profile. I can create a 3D polyline, but I can't go one way. So I've drawn this little 3D polyline here, and then I have some points. So if I create a profile from a 3D polyline, it's going to ask me to select the alignment that's going to be linked to. I want to put it on the Main Street one. Select the 3D profile polyline, and then what profile style I want, and do I want it to be labeled, and whatever I want to call it. And so you'll see here it gets projected onto that based on the elevation of those 3D polylines. It also gets labeled. So now I have a profile for that, which then can be used in a corridor or what have you. So if I want to go from points or from a polyline, I can do that instead of having to do that manually. Sometimes that's pretty nice. Okay. And these guys here, where I can actually find and replace components of styles, edit all styles, prefix, suffix, I'll explain that. Edit all table styles, or I can import styles from another drawing. Now keep in mind that's a very similar command to the import here, the import styles in the Manage tab. So this was written before this existed, so that's why it's there. So it's not as needed as much anymore. But these guys here are kind of nice. For example, let's say all of a sudden my standard changed, so I'm going to make a new text style called change, and the new text style needs to be Arial. So all of my labels need to be changed to Arial for Civil 3D. Okay, so all I did was make a new text style called Arial, or called change. So you can see in here all this text in here is all still simplex. And if you've ever tried to go through here for each of the label styles, go into one label style, come into the general, change the style here. Okay, now I only have 3,000 more to do. What's nice about this one is you can find and replace based on that. So what I'm going to do is either layer, textile, or block. If I see a textile and I'm searching for standard and I want to replace it with change, what it's going to do is if I hit find here, it's going to find every single style that has that particular property value, all of them. There's a few of them, yeah. And then I hit replace. Are you sure? So you can kind of see behind the scenes it's going through each one of these guys and assigning that new text style. Okay, looks like it's done. So now if I go to any one of these guys, you'll see now it's using change instead. You can even see in the drawing as well. So to be able to do that kind of thing is kind of a nice, definitely a nice feature to do mass changes in styles. Same thing if I want to do, like, for example, edit all styles. A lot of times what I like to do here is I'm going to go ahead and pick styles. In this drawing here, I'm going to hit pick styles, and for everything for the alignment, let me uncheck all, and for alignment. As a company, if you're making standardization, a lot of times I like to rename these and give it a prefix. So I'm going to put a prefix of CMI dash, and I can also change whoever made it if I want to give my name to that. So what that does is I just did this for alignments. By doing that, where's my alignments? See, now I put a little CMI in front of every single one of these. So what I can do is quickly have a drawing and put my prefix in front of every single one, so I know that I've made those modifications. And there's some other ones too, like edit table styles. If you want to edit every single table style, what properties? Do you want to edit the text settings for every single one of those? Make sure that the text is wrapped. All these things can be done for every single table style. So there's definitely some good positions there. Okay, I just looked at my time and a little bit over here. There's also two other ones I'll show you. You can export object layers and import object layers. For those of you who don't know, when you go to drawing settings, all these object layers, those can't transfer over either if you use manage or even if you drag and drop. So now you can export these to an Excel file and bring them back into another drawing if you need to change the layers. Like if you receive a drawing from somebody that doesn't have your layer scheme, you can do that now with this functionality. Okay. So to kind of recap, we talked about the annotative objects, hatch entities, data linking through Excel file, and then and last but not least, we had some CMI tools done as well. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to, maybe, I don't know if you have this or not. Let me do this. I'd probably do this every time, but I can't even spell. Did I do it wrong? I did. If you need to get a hold of me with a question, a comment, or if you want to get the download for CMI tools, please don't hesitate to give me a ring. I would appreciate if you guys would start thinking about what you guys might want to see for next time. I'm starting to run out of topics, so that's why this is kind of a hodgepodge today. So please write down those topics or what you're interested in, so I can so you can give those to you guys supervisors, and then I can formulate a class to adjust to what you guys need and want to see more of. If you want to revisit a topic, I don't mind doing that either. Grading and some of those styles are done way back when. If you want a refresher on that, I don't mind. Whatever you guys want to talk about. So hopefully this was somewhat informative, and next time we can even be better. So I'm going to go ahead and stop